For thousands of years, the galaxy believed Earth was weak. It was not written in any official law, but everyone accepted it as truth. Humans had no massive war fleets that blocked stars. They had no glowing shields that could swallow suns. Their ships were small, their weapons looked simple, and their voices were often ignored in the Galactic Council. When powerful empires spoke, humans listened. When wars started, humans stayed away. To the galaxy, Earth was a quiet world filled with fragile beings who survived only because they were not worth conquering. This belief became so common that no one questioned it anymore. But deep inside forgotten archives, locked behind ancient codes and dust-covered data crystals, a very different story existed, one that most species chose to forget. Long before the current empires rose to power, ancient alien historians recorded warnings about Earth. These were not myths or legends meant for children. They were cold, serious messages written by civilizations that no longer existed. They spoke of a guardian, not a machine built in factories and not a god born from faith, but something alive, something created with purpose and bound to a single planet. The records never explained its full nature. They only said that the guardian slept and that it must never be awakened. Those who ignored the warning did not survive to add more details. Over time, these records were marked as outdated, irrelevant, or exaggerated. New generations laughed at them. Powerful empires erased them from public databases. The galaxy moved on, confident that Earth was harmless. That confidence shattered the moment a human border colony vanished. The colony was small and far from Earth, located at the edge of known space. It had no military value and no strong defenses. Families lived there, miners worked quietly, and children grew up under artificial skies. When the alien empire arrived, there was no warning. Their fleet exited hyperspace like a storm tearing through calm space. Within seconds, orbital defenses were destroyed. Communication towers were erased. The surface burned as energy weapons cut through cities like light through mist. There was no long battle, no heroic last stand broadcasted to the stars. The colony was simply gone. In less than 3 minutes, every human life there ended, and the planet became silent rock and ash. Across the galaxy, many expected Earth to respond with anger or fear. Some expected desperate messages begging for mercy. Others expected threats that would be laughed at. But Earth did not answer at all. No speeches were sent. No fleets were launched. No public statements were made. The silence was so complete that even the attacking empire felt confused. To them, it looked like confirmation. Humans were weak. Humans were afraid. Humans had accepted their place. The empire prepared for more attacks, confident that Earth would fall just as easily as the colony had. What the galaxy did not see was what happened beneath Earth's surface. Far below oceans, mountains, and cities, deeper than any human had ever dug, ancient structures began to wake. These were not human-made in the modern sense. Their materials did not match any known element. Their designs followed no known geometry. For thousands of years, they had remained inactive, hidden inside the planet itself, as if Earth had grown them like bones. When the colony was destroyed, a signal reached these structures. It was not a radio wave or a digital command. It was something older, something tied to survival. Slowly, systems that had not moved since before recorded human history began to stir. The first change was small. Earth's core released a pulse of energy so subtle that human scientists barely noticed it. Then came another pulse, stronger this time. Instruments across the planet recorded strange readings. Gravity fluctuated by fractions. Magnetic fields shifted. Deep-sea sensors detected vibrations that did not match any known natural process. Governments noticed, but no one panicked. They had no idea what they were witnessing. Even humanity had forgotten the truth. Meanwhile, far beyond Earth, something far more alarming happened. Across the galaxy, ancient warning beacons activated. These beacons had been silent for tens of thousands of years. Many were believed to be broken or abandoned relics from extinct species. Some were built into asteroids. Others floated in deep space near dead stars. When they activated, they did not send long messages. They sent one short signal, repeating again and again, spreading faster than any known communication network. Elder species recognized it immediately. Younger species did not understand it at first, but they saw the reaction of their elders and felt fear for the first time. The signal meant only one thing. The Guardian was waking. In hidden chambers on distant worlds, ancient beings stopped speaking mid-sentence. Some collapsed in silence. Others ordered immediate evacuations without explanation. Old military commanders, long retired, were called back into service. Archives that had not been opened in ages were unlocked. The same words appeared again and again in these ancient texts. Earth, Guardian, extinction. Those who remembered understood the truth. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. The Galactic Council called an emergency session, but panic filled the room before any discussion began. Younger species demanded answers. They wanted to know why a single destroyed human colony caused such chaos. The elders did not answer immediately. Some could not find the words. Others feared saying them out loud. Finally, one of the oldest council members spoke, its voice heavy with memory. It said that Earth was never weak. Earth was restrained. Humanity was never unprotected. Humanity was guarded by something that was designed to sleep as long as humans survived in peace. The attacking empire ignored all warnings. Their leaders laughed at the emergency session. They dismissed the elders as fearful and outdated. They believed the beacons were a bluff, a psychological trick meant to scare rivals. Their sensors showed Earth still silent. No fleets moved. No weapons fired. To them, it was proof that the stories were lies. They announced their next attack publicly, claiming they would strike closer to Earth itself to show the galaxy what true power looked like. This announcement sent shockwaves through space, but it was already too late. Back on Earth, the ancient structures fully activated. A vast network of energy spread through the planet like veins lighting up. Deep underground chambers opened for the first time. Something massive shifted, adjusting itself after a sleep that lasted longer than civilizations. It did not feel anger or hatred. It felt purpose. It was aware of humanity, aware of danger, and aware that a line had been crossed. The Guardian did not need instructions. It was built to know when to wake. For the first time in recorded galactic history, space around Earth changed. Ships passing nearby reported distorted sensors. Navigation systems failed. Light bent in strange ways, making distances impossible to measure correctly. Astronomers on distant worlds observed Earth's star flicker, not from instability, but from interference caused by something unseen. The planet itself became a signal, broadcasting a presence that could not be ignored. Even those who had never believed the old warnings felt it now, a deep and unsettling pressure, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the signal reached its peak. Every active beacon across the galaxy repeated the same message one final time, clearer than ever before. It did not threaten. It did not explain. It simply confirmed the truth the galaxy had forgotten. The Guardian was no longer asleep, and once awake, it would not be easily silenced. From that moment on, nothing about Earth could be considered simple or weak again. The galaxy stood frozen in fear, realizing that the quiet planet they had ignored for so long was about to remind everyone why some powers are meant to remain unseen. The Galactic Council chamber had seen wars, betrayals, and the fall of empires, but it had never felt fear like this. The moment the ancient warning beacons activated, the air inside the chamber changed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Lights felt dimmer, even though their brightness never changed. Younger species looked around in confusion, unable to understand why the elders had gone silent. To them, Earth was still a small blue world with weak ships and soft voices. They could not understand why the destruction of one human colony had shaken beings who had survived supernovas and galaxy-wide wars. The elders, however, remembered. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to feel the weight pressing on their minds. Many of them had been young when their teachers spoke of the Guardian in quiet tones, as if speaking too loudly might wake something that should never be disturbed. Those lessons were always followed by one rule: never corner humanity, never push them to the edge, because when humans lose everything, the Guardian listens. An ancient delegate finally stood, its body supported by floating rings of energy, its eyes old and tired. Its voice was slow, carrying a sadness that filled the chamber. It said that long before the current order of the galaxy, Earth had already faced extinction once. Humanity had been hunted, tested, and nearly erased by forces far older than the present empires. Back then, humans were weaker than they were now, scattered across their own system, barely surviving. They knew they would not win a long war, so they did something no other species had ever dared to do. They built a protector not to conquer the galaxy, but to ensure their species would never be erased again. They did not make it cruel. They did not make it hungry for power. They made it patient. They made it sleep. And they bound it to one condition only: awaken if humanity faced annihilation. The elder paused, its voice trembling, and said that condition had just been met. Shock spread through the chamber, followed by denial. Several delegates laughed nervously. One demanded proof. Another called it an old myth meant to scare rivals. They argued that humans still showed no signs of resistance, that Earth remained silent, that no fleets had moved. To them, silence meant surrender. But the elder shook its head slowly and said silence was never surrender when it came to humans. Silence meant preparation. Silence meant restraint. Silence meant that humans were letting something else speak for them. As if to prove the point, new reports flooded the chamber. Navigation failures near Earth increased. Long-range sensors could no longer measure the planet accurately. Some instruments showed Earth as larger than it should be, others as smaller, as if space itself could not decide what Earth truly was anymore. Panic began to spread, quiet at first, then growing louder with every new report. Far from the council, on a world that had once fought humans centuries ago, an old military commander watched the same data with shaking hands. He had been there long ago when his fleet chased human ships through dark space. He remembered how humans fought not with rage, but with stubborn refusal to die. He remembered the moment his superiors ordered retreat without explanation, and how no one ever spoke of that war again. Now, as the warning beacons screamed across space, he understood why. Tears formed in his eyes as he whispered that they should have left humans alone. They always should have left them alone. He ordered his planet's defenses shut down and evacuation ships prepared, not because he expected an attack, but because he knew that when the Guardian moved, collateral damage did not matter. Survival did. On Earth, humanity felt none of the galactic panic, but something else spread instead: grief. News of the destroyed colony reached the public, and the planet mourned in quiet unity. There were no celebrations, no calls for revenge shouted in the streets. Families lit candles. Names were read aloud. Children asked why people hated humans so much. Leaders spoke carefully, choosing words that calmed rather than inflamed. Beneath that calm surface, however, fear mixed with determination. Earth's leaders had access to secrets ordinary humans did not. Deep archives opened. Forgotten facilities reported activation without command. Ancient systems responded to stimuli they were never supposed to feel again. Some leaders realized the truth in horror, others in awe. Humanity's last guardian was waking, and there was no way to stop it now. Deep inside the planet, the Guardian's awareness expanded. It felt the loss of the colony not as numbers but as absence. Voices gone, futures erased. It did not feel anger the way humans did, but it felt imbalance. Humanity's survival probability had dropped below the acceptable threshold. That was enough. The Guardian adjusted parameters that had not changed in ages. It observed the galaxy, measuring threats, calculating outcomes. It noted the attacking empire's fleets, their weapons, their intent. It did not hate them. It simply classified them as a danger that must be removed if escalation continued. The Guardian remembered its purpose clearly, even if the galaxy had forgotten it. Back in the council chamber, the attacking empire finally spoke. Its representative stood tall and proud, mocking the fear around it. It declared that Earth was already defeated, that the galaxy should stop panicking over ghost stories. It announced that a full invasion fleet was already on its way toward Earth, and that soon the myth of human importance would be erased forever. As the words echoed through the chamber, the warning beacons changed tone. The sound grew deeper, heavier, pressing against the minds of those who heard it. Elder delegates cried out, recognizing the shift. This was no longer a warning. This was confirmation. The Guardian had moved from passive watch to active readiness. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Even the proud representative stopped speaking, a flicker of doubt crossing its face for the first time. Reports showed its fleet experiencing failures before even reaching Earth space. Drives misfired. Formations broke apart. Communication lagged by impossible margins. The galaxy realized the truth too late. The Guardian did not need to attack to inspire fear. Its mere awakening was enough to bend reality. As the council session ended in chaos, one understanding settled across every world, every species, every mind. Humanity had been underestimated not because it was weak, but because it chose to be quiet. And now that quiet had ended, Earth did not announce a state of war. There were no loud speeches, no flags raised in anger, and no dramatic calls for revenge. Instead, the planet moved with a calm that felt unnatural to those watching from the outside. To many alien observers, this calm looked like fear or denial. To humans, it was something else entirely. It was focus. Humanity had learned long ago that panic only wasted time, and time was the one thing they could not afford to lose. Governments across Earth activated silent protocols that had never been used before, protocols written by people whose names were almost forgotten. Cities did not shut down, but beneath them, deep shelters opened. Transportation systems rerouted millions without drawing attention. Hospitals prepared not for war injuries, but for mass survival. It was not chaos. It was preparation done with steady hands and heavy hearts. Families were moved quietly. Children were told stories instead of truths, stories about long trips and safe places underground. Parents smiled even when fear burned behind their eyes. Soldiers were not sent to the stars in glory-filled fleets. They were sent inward, to protect infrastructure, power systems, and the ancient facilities buried deep below the surface. Many of those soldiers did not even know what they were guarding. They only knew that their orders came with a weight that made questions feel wrong. Above ground, daily life continued as normally as possible. Markets stayed open. Schools held classes. Music still played. Humanity chose to live, even as the shadow of extinction hovered close. In hidden chambers beneath mountains and oceans, Earth's oldest systems completed their activation. Screens that had been dark for centuries flickered to life. Symbols appeared that no modern human language could fully translate, yet their meaning felt clear to those who saw them. These systems were not fully under human control. They never had been. Humanity had built them long ago, but with limits placed by fear and wisdom. The Guardian was not a weapon to be aimed. It was a promise to survive. Now that promise was answering a call that humans themselves had never wanted to make. Deep within the planet, the Guardian observed humanity's actions. It felt their grief, their restraint, their refusal to fall into blind rage. These emotions did not confuse it. They confirmed its design. Humans were still the species it had been created to protect. They mourned their dead instead of celebrating violence. They prepared to save lives rather than to destroy enemies. This restraint mattered. The Guardian adjusted its response accordingly, setting boundaries even as it prepared for conflict. It would not destroy the galaxy. It would not punish those who were not a threat. But it would not allow humanity to be erased again. Across the stars, the attacking Empire's invasion fleet continued its advance, though nothing felt right anymore. Crews reported strange dreams, filled with images of Earth wrapped in light and shadow. Navigation officers complained that charts no longer aligned with reality. Time measurements drifted. Orders sent from command arrived late or distorted. Some ships turned back on their own, their systems overriding commands in what engineers could not explain. Fear crept into the fleet, quiet but unstoppable. Veterans who had crushed dozens of worlds felt something they had not felt in centuries. They felt watched. On Earth, leaders faced the hardest choice of all. They knew the Guardian was waking fully, and once awake, It could not be forced back into sleep easily. Some argued that humanity should try to stop it, to prove to the galaxy that they were still peaceful, still harmless. Others knew the truth. Peace had already failed. A human colony lay in ashes, and the enemy showed no regret. Allowing the Guardian to act was not choosing war. It was choosing survival. With heavy hearts, humanity's representatives agreed to let the ancient promise stand. They would not command the Guardian. They would trust it. In the quiet hours before the invasion fleet reached Earth's influence, the planet held its breath. Messages were sent to distant human outposts, telling them to hide, to stay silent, to survive no matter what. Some humans prayed. Others simply held each other. Across cultures and languages, one shared feeling spread. A deep sadness mixed with unbreakable resolve. Humanity did not want to be feared. It wanted to live. But if fear was the price of survival, it would be paid. Deep underground, the Guardian completed its final checks. It expanded its awareness beyond Earth, mapping threats, predicting outcomes, and calculating the minimum force required to end the danger. It noted the approaching fleet and the empire behind it. It prepared responses that did not rely on brute destruction alone. The Guardian understood something the galaxy never had. True power was not loud. It was precise. It was controlled. It waited until the moment when action would matter most. As the invasion fleet crossed an invisible boundary around Earth, the first true sign appeared. Space itself seemed to tighten, as if drawn toward the planet. The stars shifted slightly, not in position, but in clarity. Signals slowed. Engines strained. The fleet commanders issued orders, but doubt had already taken root. Earth still remained silent. No warnings, no threats, no demands. That silence, heavier than any weapon, pressed against every mind in the fleet. In that moment, far beneath Earth's surface, the Guardian opened its eyes fully for the first time in ages. The preparation phase ended. Observation shifted to intervention. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's quiet nature had never been weakness. It had been patience. As the invading fleet moved deeper into Earth's space, confusion turned into fear. What had once been clean and predictable routes became unstable. Distances felt wrong. Ships that were supposed to fly in perfect formation began drifting apart, as if invisible currents pushed them away from one another. Commanders shouted orders, but their voices carried less authority with every passing second. Instruments reported impossible data. Some screens showed Earth growing larger with every moment, while others showed it shrinking, as if the planet refused to be measured. The crews had conquered dozens of worlds before, yet none of their experience prepared them for this. There was no enemy in sight, no weapons fire, no explosions. Just a crushing sense that something immense was becoming aware of them. Back on Earth, scientists watched the same distortions with a mix of fear and wonder. They knew they were witnessing something beyond their understanding. Telescopes detected ripples in space, not caused by ships or weapons, but by a presence. Gravity waves spread outward like a slow heartbeat, steady and unstoppable. The planet itself seemed to be breathing. Some researchers realized, with shaking hands, that Earth was no longer just a world in space. It had become the center of a field, a point around which reality itself was bending. They whispered the word Guardian, not as a name, but as a truth finally revealed. Deep beneath the surface, the Guardian began to act. It did not rush. It did not unleash destruction. Instead, it reached outward, touching space gently at first, like testing the temperature of water. The Guardian felt the invading fleet as sharp disturbances, aggressive and loud. It analyzed their weapons, their intentions, and their history. It saw worlds burned, species broken, and civilizations erased. It did not judge them morally. It simply recognized a pattern that threatened humanity's continued existence. That pattern had to be interrupted. The Guardian adjusted its influence, increasing pressure in carefully calculated layers. On the invading ships, the emotional toll grew unbearable. Veterans who had survived countless battles felt their confidence crumble. Some crew members broke down, convinced they were already dead. Others stared at Earth on their screens, unable to look away. The planet looked peaceful, blue and calm, yet terrifying in its stillness. No defense platforms, no visible fleets, just silence. That silence spoke louder than any threat. It felt deliberate, controlled, and absolute. Whispers spread among the crews. Old stories resurfaced, stories they had dismissed as lies. Stories about a sleeping protector that did not fight wars, but ended them. The first physical response came without warning. One of the fleet's outer ships simply stopped. Its engines did not explode. The systems did not fail violently. They shut down as if someone had turned a key. The ship drifted helplessly, power fading, communication silent. Then another ship followed. Then another. Panic erupted. Commanders ordered full retreat, but the fleet no longer responded as a single force. Navigation systems could not lock onto coordinates. Jump drives refused to activate. It was as if space itself had decided the fleet was no longer welcome. On Earth, leaders watched these events unfold with heavy hearts. They felt no joy, no satisfaction, only sorrow. They knew the Guardian was protecting them, but they also understood the cost. Once the galaxy saw this power, humanity would never be seen the same way again. Fear would replace indifference. Distance would replace cooperation. Some leaders wept quietly, mourning not just the lost colony, but the innocence humanity had once hoped to keep. They had wanted to stand among the stars as equals, not as something others feared. The Guardian sensed this sorrow. It did not ignore it. It adjusted its actions again, limiting damage, choosing restraint even now. It did not destroy the fleet. It immobilized it. It wanted the message to be clear without being cruel. Humanity's survival did not require endless death. It required certainty. The Guardian broadcast no words, but its presence carried meaning. Do not advance. Do not attack. Do not repeat this mistake. Across the galaxy, observers watched in stunned silence. News spread faster than fear. The invading empire's proud armada had been stopped without a single visible shot fired. Worlds that had laughed at the old warnings now scrambled to understand them. Ancient beings bowed their heads, knowing the truth they had tried to bury had returned. Younger species felt their first true sense of vulnerability. The galaxy had always believed power was loud and violent. Earth had just proven that the greatest power could be quiet and controlled. As the immobilized fleet hung helplessly in space, the Guardian's focus sharpened. This was not the final step. It was a demonstration. A line had been drawn, not in blood, but in reality itself. The Guardian prepared for what would come next, knowing the attacking empire would not accept humiliation easily. Deep within Earth, ancient systems stabilized, and the planet's strange new fields settled into a steady state. Earth remained silent, calm, and unchanged on the surface. But the galaxy now understood something it could never forget. The Guardian was awake, and humanity was no longer alone. The galaxy did not celebrate what it had just witnessed. There were no cheers, no songs of victory, no proud declarations of peace. Instead, a heavy silence spread from system to system, thicker than fear, deeper than shock. The immobilized invasion fleet hung near Earth like a warning carved into space itself. Every species watched, not just with eyes and sensors, but with memory. Old legends resurfaced. Forgotten teachers' words echoed again. The truth could no longer be denied. The Guardian was real and it was awake. For many worlds, this realization brought relief. For others, it brought terror. Power that could stop an empire without violence was not something that could be easily understood or controlled. Within the Galactic Council, panic gave way to desperate urgency. Emergency sessions followed one another without rest. Delegates argued, pleaded, and accused. Some demanded that Earth be isolated immediately, sealed behind political borders and forbidden zones. Others argued the opposite, insisting that humans must be approached carefully, with humility and respect. The elders, tired and heavy with guilt, listened more than they spoke. They knew this moment had been building for ages. The galaxy had chosen convenience over wisdom, silence over memory. Now it was paying the price. When one young delegate asked what the Guardian wanted, no one could answer. That uncertainty frightened them more than any weapon. Far away, on the capital world of the attacking empire, rage exploded. Leaders who had built their power on conquest could not accept what had happened. Their greatest fleet had been stopped, humiliated, frozen in space like an exhibit of failure. They refused to believe that Earth or its guardian could truly threaten them. They declared the immobilization a temporary anomaly and ordered preparations for escalation. New weapons were authorized. Ancient forbidden technologies were unlocked. Their scientists were pushed beyond safety limits, driven by fear of losing dominance. Pride blinded them. They believed that if the Guardian existed, it could be killed like anything else. Among the Empire's people, however, a different emotion spread. Soldiers watched recordings from the frozen fleet and felt dread. Families questioned the leader's decisions for the first time. Whispers of doubt turned into quiet protests. The Empire had always promised victory and glory. Now it offered only risk and silence. Some began to ask a question that had never been allowed before. What if humanity was not the enemy? What if the Empire had crossed a line that should never have been crossed? Those questions were quickly silenced, but they did not disappear. Fear has a way of surviving suppression. On Earth, humanity faced its own emotional storm. People saw the images too. They saw the once terrifying alien fleet trapped and powerless. Some felt relief. Others felt sorrow. Many felt both at the same time. There was no joy in seeing another species brought to helplessness. Memorials for the destroyed colony grew larger, filled with messages of remembrance rather than calls for revenge. Humanity's grief remained quiet and deep. They had not asked for the Guardian to wake. They had not wanted the galaxy to fear them. Yet they understood that survival sometimes demanded consequences. Deep underground, the Guardian remained active but calm. It monitored every reaction across the stars. It saw the Council's confusion, the Empire's rage, and humanity's sorrow. These emotional responses mattered. The Guardian's purpose was not only to protect lives, but to maintain balance. It recognized that the greatest danger now was escalation. A wounded empire could become reckless. A frightened galaxy could unite against Earth out of misunderstanding. The Guardian adjusted its plans, preparing not just for battle, but for deterrence. It would need to make its boundaries unmistakably clear. The first sign of this new phase came subtly. The immobilized fleet near Earth did not remain static. Slowly, carefully, the Guardian released a portion of its control. Systems came back online just enough for survival. Life support stabilized. Communications within the fleet resumed, but no external signals could escape. It was a message without words. You are alive because you are allowed to be alive. The fleet commanders understood this immediately. Many of them felt shame, a feeling long unfamiliar to conquerors. They realized their fate was no longer in their own hands. Across the galaxy, reactions intensified. Some worlds began dismantling old invasion plans, erasing any strategy that involved Earth or human space. Trade routes shifted away from Earth's region, not out of hostility, but out of respect and fear. Younger species asked their elders to tell the full story at last, no matter how frightening. The elders finally spoke openly, admitting how close the galaxy had once come to destruction and how humanity's guardian had stopped it before. These revelations reshaped beliefs overnight. Humanity was no longer seen as a small, quiet species. It was seen as a line the universe itself had drawn. The attacking empire, however, made its choice. Ignoring internal doubt and external warnings, its leaders approved one final plan. A weapon unlike anything they had used before would be deployed, designed not to attack Earth directly, but to tear at the space around it, to disrupt whatever force protected the planet. They believed this would expose the Guardian, force it to react fully, and give them a chance to strike. Even some of their own scientists warned that this could destabilize entire regions of space. The warnings were dismissed. Fear had replaced reason. The Guardian felt this decision the moment it was made. Intent carried weight in the universe, and the Guardian was sensitive to such shifts. It recognized that the Empire was preparing to cross from threat into irreversible action. This could not be allowed. The Guardian did not feel anger, but it felt certainty. The time for demonstrations was ending. Soon, the galaxy would face a choice shaped by consequences rather than fear. As Earth continued its quiet mourning and preparation, the Guardian adjusted its stance once more. The next move would not merely stop an attack. It would redefine what power truly meant in the galaxy. As the invading fleet pressed closer to Earth, reality itself began to shift around them. The stars no longer shone in familiar patterns. Sensors wavered and failed. Engines groaned under pressures that should not exist in normal space. The commanders tried to stay calm, issuing orders to maintain formation, to stabilize flight paths, to prepare for battle, but their voices rang hollow. Every crew member felt an invisible weight pressing down on their minds, a presence older and larger than anything they had encountered. The fleet, once confident and proud, moved like frightened children under an unseen hand. Panic bubbled quietly at first, then grew, spreading through every deck, every corridor, every control room. Fear is contagious, and in the vacuum of space, it became a storm that no one could escape. Deep beneath Earth's surface, the Guardian stirred fully. It had observed, calculated, and prepared, and now it acted. A subtle pulse spread through the planet, radiating outward in waves that distorted the very fabric of space. Gravitational anomalies bent light, twisted space, and rendered the invading fleet's sensors useless. Communication links cracked, scrambled into incoherence, and failed entirely. Time itself seemed to stretch and contract near Earth. No one could explain it, and those who tried to rationalize it felt their minds fray. The Guardian did not strike with fire or beams. It did not unleash explosions. It moved with quiet authority, an unstoppable force made of precision and purpose, showing the galaxy that true power did not need to roar to be feared. The first physical manifestation of the Guardian was subtle, yet impossible to ignore. Space folded and shifted around the approaching fleet. Ships stalled mid-flight, their engines straining uselessly against invisible forces. Navigation systems failed entirely, leaving captains grasping at controls that no longer responded. Star maps became meaningless as distances bent like ripples in water. The crews tried desperately to maintain order, but their actions were already anticipated, already countered by a force beyond comprehension. Confusion turned to terror, and terror turned to helplessness. Some soldiers screamed, others prayed, and a few simply went silent, knowing instinctively that survival no longer depended on their skill or courage. It depended on something else entirely, something alive, ancient, and unyielding. On Earth, scientists and leaders watched from secure observation posts, their emotions a tangle of fear, awe, and sorrow. They understood, finally, the full scale of what humanity had awakened. It was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a protector, a judgment, a silent promise made long ago by ancestors who had faced extinction and refused to be erased. Tears ran down faces that had never wept publicly. Hands trembled even as they documented the anomalies, knowing that these readings were beyond human comprehension. And yet, beneath the awe, a quiet pride arose. Humanity had survived countless threats before, relying on cunning and perseverance. But now they had a guardian who would ensure their survival without question. Still, grief lingered. A colony had been lost, lives erased, and the weight of that sorrow was felt collectively across the planet. Meanwhile, the immobilized fleet experienced something far more personal. Individual ships began to exhibit strange phenomena. Lights flickered in patterns that resembled human faces. Echoes of long-forgotten voices filled corridors. Dreams seeped into the minds of officers, showing memories they never had, futures they feared, and histories they could not have known. The Guardian's awareness reached into consciousness, not to harm, but to communicate its presence. It was telling them that humanity would survive, that further aggression would not be tolerated, and that any attempt to harm humans would be met with absolute, inescapable consequence. Crew members wept quietly in their stations, some whispering apologies to beings they had never met, realizing too late that they had misjudged the quiet planet they had thought weak. The commanders of the invading empire struggled to maintain control, but their authority crumbled with every passing moment. Orders were given and contradicted, weapons primed and rendered useless, fleets stalled and fractured. Pride turned to fear, fear to desperation. Some officers considered mutiny, but even dissent felt meaningless. They were caught in a force that did not reason like a living commander, but did not blindly destroy like a mindless machine. The Guardians' restraint was terrifying, a lesson delivered without unnecessary violence. The fleet, once a symbol of conquest, had become an example of the cost of underestimating the unknown. Back on Earth, humanity prepared silently for what might come next. They did not cheer the confusion of alien fleets. They did not celebrate the Guardians' first demonstration. Instead, they honored the lost, tended to their wounded, and strengthened their defenses quietly. In every action, from the highest council to the simplest civilian, there was a mixture of grief and determination. The Guardian had chosen restraint. Humans hoped to match it with dignity. They understood that their protector's awakening meant a new era, one in which survival depended not on bravado or fleets, but on restraint, intelligence, and the understanding that some powers could never be measured by conventional means. The Guardian extended its awareness beyond immediate threats. It observed the galaxy, noting every reaction, every panic, every plan to intervene. Its power radiated as a silent warning, clear to those who could perceive it. Humanity was no longer a species to be tested lightly. The Guardian did not attack further because it did not need to. Its presence alone altered the course of events, reshaping strategy, fear, and thought across thousands of worlds. The galaxy learned something it could not unlearn. The greatest power was not loud, not violent, and not visible. It was patient, precise, and alive. And for the first time in countless millennia, the galaxy understood the depth of humanity's hidden strength, because the Guardian had revealed itself in quiet, unstoppable authority. The Guardian did not attack. It never needed to. It did not shout. It did not fire beams. It did not crush ships into dust. Instead, it revealed itself in a way the galaxy had never witnessed. From deep beneath the Earth's crust, it rose with a presence that bent reality, stretching higher than mountains, wider than continents, a living construct of energy, light, and thought. Its form was not fixed. It shimmered, flowing between shapes that humans could barely comprehend, half matter, half consciousness, bound to the will of those it had been created to protect. Every pulse it emitted carried meaning, every ripple in space a statement that the galaxy could not ignore. The stars themselves seemed to bend toward it, as if the universe acknowledged its awakening. The invading fleet froze completely, systems shut down, weapons unresponsive, engines silent. The soldiers stared, wide-eyed and trembling, not understanding what they were seeing, only that it was beyond anything they had known, beyond anything they could fight. Terror had become awe. Within the fleet, fear transformed into helplessness. Commanders barked orders that were never executed. Messages to other ships failed to transmit. The crew experienced sensations they had never had before. Whispers of the past, visions of worlds they had never touched, echoes of human suffering from centuries ago. The Guardian reached into their minds, not to harm, but to make them feel the weight of their actions, the consequences of attacking a species whose protector had finally awakened. Some collapsed to their knees, unable to breathe under the invisible pressure. Some whispered apologies into empty corridors. Others stared at the displays, knowing that no strategy, no weapon, no amount of courage could overcome this force. Their pride, which had carried them across galaxies, disintegrated into raw fear. The Guardian had not yet struck, yet every heart knew what would happen if they continued to defy its warning. On Earth, humans watched through secure observation points, but even they could not fully comprehend the scale. They felt a mixture of awe, fear, and grief. Their grief came first. The lost colony, erased in seconds, was never forgotten. Faces appeared in their minds, lives cut short, futures stolen. They mourned silently, knowing the Guardian had risen not to celebrate vengeance, but to protect life. Relief followed the grief, a deep and heavy sense of being safeguarded by something far older, wiser, and more powerful than themselves. And finally, pride bloomed quietly. Humanity had survived countless dangers, hidden from the galaxy, underestimated by all. And now it had the protector its ancestors had left behind. The Guardian was not wrathful. It was precise, patient, and bound to them, and that realization filled hearts with both gratitude and solemnity. The Guardian spoke, not with words in any language, but with meaning transmitted directly into consciousness. Every human, every leader, every being aware of its presence understood the message simultaneously. Humanity had been preserved not because of strength alone, but because of restraint, patience, and the careful choices of countless generations. The Guardian reminded them of the truth of their species, that even in weakness, humans could endure, adapt, and survive. It revealed the history they had long forgotten, the trials humanity had faced before recorded time, when the species had almost been wiped out, when the ancestors had forged a final promise in the form of this living protector. The Guardian's awakening was not an act of rage, but an act of reckoning, a mirror held up to the galaxy, showing what happens when those who are underestimated are cornered, and showing humanity why survival had always required foresight, courage, and restraint. The alien fleets, still immobilized, sensed a deeper truth. The Guardian had no need to destroy to demonstrate its authority. It was aware of every weapon, every plan, every hidden agenda. It saw potential death and suffering, calculated consequences, and imposed limits without chaos. The Empire realized too late that their arrogance had misjudged not just humans, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Their pride had been their undoing, and in that realization came despair. Generals and admirals, once proud and unshakable, bowed their heads in helplessness. Young soldiers sobbed quietly in their stations, understanding intuitively that the strength of humanity had always been more than fleets or weapons. The Guardian had awakened, and humanity's hidden truth shone brighter than the most powerful stars. Even as the Guardian held back, its presence reshaped the galaxy. Navigation systems near Earth became unstable for anyone approaching, stars and distances bending in ways that seemed deliberate. Beings across countless systems felt an unspoken warning, a message carved into the very structure of space. Do not threaten humans. Some heeded it, others did not, but all felt the gravity of what had occurred. The Guardian's restraint only made the threat more terrifying. It was a living promise that humanity would endure, and that any who sought to test them would feel the consequences, not with mindless fury, but with precise, inevitable certainty. Within the halls of the Galactic Council, elders wept quietly. They had lived through wars and betrayals, through extinction-level events, yet nothing had ever made them feel so powerless and yet so relieved at the same time. The young delegates, terrified, asked why the Guardian had not destroyed the fleet immediately, why it had not struck vengeance upon the Empire. The elders answered softly, their voices breaking with age and sorrow. It did not need to. Destruction is loud and temporary. Preservation is quiet and eternal. The Guardian acted not with vengeance, but with the patience that only time and purpose can grant. Humanity was alive, and that fact alone carried the weight of fear, respect, and awe across the galaxy. For the humans on the surface, the emotions were overwhelming. Grief for the lost, fear for the present, awe at what had been revealed, pride in the enduring spirit of their species. They carried all of it at once. In every city, in every hidden facility, in every heart humanity understood. Their survival had never been accidental. It had been safeguarded by something greater than themselves, something that had waited silently for the precise moment to rise. And now, as the Guardian loomed above them in its full glory, humanity faced the galaxy not as weak or helpless beings, but as a species whose very existence carried a force the universe had never seen, a protector alive, patient, and unstoppable. The galaxy had never been quieter. Even the hum of distant stars seemed subdued, as if the universe itself held its breath. The Guardian did not move with rage or malice, Yet its presence alone made the invasion fleet feel as though they had crossed into the very edge of mortality. Ships that had once conquered planets now drifted powerless, frozen in space. Every sensor flickered, every calculation failed, and every attempt to restore control only deepened confusion. Engineers frantically recalculated trajectories that no longer existed. Weapons systems locked down without reason. Even experienced pilots, those who had survived countless battles, felt an unbearable weight pressing into their minds, a silent, unyielding judgment that reminded them they had underestimated what they did not understand. Fear in its purest form spread through the fleet, not from explosions or fire, but from the undeniable presence of something ancient and precise, alive and patient, yet undeniably aware of their every intention. On Earth, humanity felt the pressure differently. It was not fear they felt, though it was part of it, but a mix of sorrow, awe, and profound responsibility. Leaders and civilians alike understood the scale of what had been awakened beneath them. Their grief for the lost colony lingered, sharper than ever, yet now it was mingled with relief. Something that had once been dormant had risen to ensure survival, something that would protect them not out of anger but out of purpose. The Guardian was more than a shield. It was a reckoning, a promise kept across millennia, a quiet power that spoke louder than any weapon. Humanity understood in that moment that their species' resilience had never been about strength in numbers or fleets or guns. It had always been about endurance, intelligence, and the foresight to prepare for the unimaginable. Deep within the Guardian, awareness expanded. It did not simply see the approaching empire. It understood it, every instinct, every strategy, every ambition. The Guardian did not feel hatred, but it understood danger. The invading fleet represented the potential for annihilation, the erasure of what it was designed to protect. Every life aboard those ships mattered less than the lives of humans. Yet every choice it made was deliberate, precise, calculated to send a message without unnecessary death. And still, it felt the weight of humanity's grief. It felt the sorrow of lives lost, the hope of those who remained, the quiet determination of a species that had always survived against impossible odds. That emotion did not confuse it. It guided it, refined its focus, and reminded it of the core principle it had been designed to uphold. Preserve humanity, and do so with awareness and care. Across the galaxy, panic intensified. Elder species recognized the Guardian for what it truly was. Warnings that had been ignored for generations were finally understood in full. Young species, who had laughed at human myths, now scrambled in fear. Observers, scientists, and military strategists alike watched in disbelief as the Guardian demonstrated control over a threat without firing a shot, without spilling blood. It immobilized entire fleets, disrupted navigation, and manipulated space itself, all with calm precision. The galaxy understood that power could be subtle, deliberate, patient, and that underestimating humanity had been catastrophic. Stories of past human conflicts, of their cleverness and stubborn resilience, resurfaced, now combined with the undeniable proof of what lay beneath the planet's surface. The legends had been true, more true than anyone had dared to believe. On the invading fleet, desperation turned to despair. Officers who had once led fleets into battle found themselves crying silently in their command chairs. They whispered apologies into empty corridors, haunted by visions they could not explain. Visions of humans lost, of worlds burned, of futures erased. Dreams intruded into consciousness. Entire histories of humanity, both known and forgotten, pressed upon their minds with the weight of inevitability. They understood instinctively that nothing they had done would be sufficient to break this presence. Pride, once unshakable, dissolved into raw humility and fear. They realized, in moments of unbearable clarity, that the humans they had dismissed as weak were never defenseless. They had been restrained. They had survived quietly, deliberately, and now the full extent of that preparation was before them. Humanity itself did not respond with triumph. They did not rejoice at the immobilization of the fleet. Their relief was tempered with grief, their awe tempered with humility. They knew that this awakening came at a cost, and that the galaxy's fear, though protective, could also bring further consequences. The Guardians' restraint inspired them to reflect on their own restraint, on the choices they had made for survival, on the countless generations that had endured hardship, starvation, war, and near extinction to build the world they now inhabited. In every city, in every underground facility, people understood the enormity of the moment. The planet's protector had awakened, the galaxy had learned its lesson, and yet the true challenge was only beginning. The Guardian prepared for what it knew would come next. Though it had immobilized the fleet, it understood that the Empire would not accept this outcome lightly. They would seek ways to circumvent its control, to challenge its presence. The Guardian's calculations considered every possibility, every scenario, every potential threat. Yet even as it prepared, it respected the lives of those within the fleet. It did not wish for unnecessary destruction, but it would not allow humanity to be harmed again. Its movements, silent and precise, sent a clear message across space. The humans it protected would endure, the galaxy would be reminded of its folly, and the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. In those moments, Earth's people felt a connection to something larger than themselves, something ancient and eternal, something that had watched over them long before history began and would continue long after current empires fell. The Guardian's awakening was not an act of war. It was an act of preservation, an emotional resonance that carried the sorrow of the past, the grief of the present, and the hope of the future. Humanity had survived countless threats by cunning, endurance, and resilience. Now, with the Guardian awake, they would survive the galaxy itself. And the universe, for the first time in countless millennia, understood that the quiet planet they had underestimated was the heart of a power no one could control, the living embodiment of patience, restraint, and the unyielding will to endure. The galaxy was silent in a way it had never been before. Even distant stars seemed muted, as if space itself held its breath. The Guardian did not shout, did not fire, did not destroy, and yet every fleet, every observer, every species understood its presence with absolute clarity. The immobilized invasion fleet hung in orbit, powerless, their engines whining uselessly as if the universe had tied their hands. Officers paced frantically. Soldiers trembled. Every attempt to regain control failed, and the weight of helplessness pressed down like gravity multiplied. They were facing something far older, far wiser, and far more deliberate than anything they had ever encountered. Pride and arrogance, which had carried them through centuries of conquest, dissolved into fear and awe. Their enemy was not human. Their enemy was something humanity had built, something humanity had protected, something that could bend the galaxy without firing a single shot. On Earth, humanity watched in quiet unity. There were no celebrations, no triumphant speeches, no boasts of victory. Instead, there was reflection. Families lit candles for the lost colony. Leaders stood in silence as reports streamed in from observation posts. Scientists documented anomalies with trembling hands, knowing their instruments could not capture the full truth. And yet, amid the grief and awe, a quiet pride emerged. Humanity had survived not because it was strongest, not because it had the largest fleets, not because it had advanced weapons, but because it had endured, it had restrained itself, and it had prepared for this moment for generations. The Guardian's awakening was a testament to that endurance, to the foresight of ancestors who had faced extinction and refused to surrender. Deep within the Guardian, awareness expanded, folding around Earth and reaching outward to the immobilized fleet. It calculated outcomes, observed intentions, and adjusted responses with precision. It understood threat without needing to feel anger. It felt grief for the lost colony, sorrow for humanity's suffering, and admiration for their patience and restraint. It knew that death could be delivered in many ways, but restraint demanded greater discipline. And it chose restraint. It immobilized the fleet, disrupted communication, distorted space, and yet spared lives. It communicated not with words, but with presence, an overwhelming certainty that humanity's survival was non-negotiable. Across the galaxy, the ripple effects were immediate. Elder species, long silent on human history, began speaking openly. Forgotten records were dusted off. Myths once dismissed were acknowledged as truth. Younger species, who had once mocked humans as weak, now whispered in fear, awe, and respect. The lessons of the past, ignored for centuries, were suddenly relevant again. Humanity had not been a minor player in galactic politics. It had been quietly preparing, restrained, and enduring. And now, with the Guardian awake, every species was forced to acknowledge that underestimation had consequences beyond comprehension. The empire that had launched the attack was in chaos. Their fleet, once a symbol of pride and dominance, drifted helplessly. Some officers tried to flee, others attempted to regain control, but every action was countered by the Guardian's unseen hand. Crews began to experience visions. Lost colonies, erased worlds, humans surviving against impossible odds. Their minds filled with memories and possibilities they could not comprehend. Some collapsed to the deck, weeping quietly. Others stared in silent terror, realizing that all their past victories were meaningless when faced with a force they could not see or fight. Pride gave way to despair, arrogance to humility. For the first time, they understood that humanity's greatest weapon was never technology, fleets, or strategy. It was patience, foresight, and the promise of the Guardian. On Earth, humans struggled with the weight of the moment. Relief mingled with grief, awe intertwined with sorrow. Leaders understood that the galaxy would never see them the same way again. Civilians understood that survival was no longer only about avoiding war. It was about living under the shadow of a power that could reshape reality itself. Families mourned the lost colony, knowing that lives had been erased to remind the galaxy of a simple truth: humanity would endure. The Guardian's restraint had saved them, but its awakening also marked a turning point. Humans would no longer be underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. The Guardian's awareness spread further, observing not just the fleet but the galaxy as a whole. It sensed who sought to threaten humans, who feared them, and who might act out of ignorance or pride. It did not attack preemptively, but it ensured that humanity would never again face annihilation without warning. The immobilized fleet became a living lesson, an example of the consequences of misjudging humanity. It was a warning carved into reality, unyielding, precise, and silent, yet louder than any weapon ever fired. Even as the Empire's leaders scrambled to find a solution, a sense of inevitability settled across every star system. The Guardian had reminded the galaxy of an uncomfortable truth. Humans were not weak, not defenseless, and not to be underestimated. The lives they led, the choices they made, the patience they practiced, all culminated in this singular moment. Humanity had survived because it had endured, because it had restrained itself, because it had built a protector that would awaken when most needed. And now, with the Guardian fully aware, the galaxy could no longer ignore that humanity's quiet strength had become a force that reshaped stars, fleets, and the balance of power itself. The Guardian did not strike. It did not need to. Its presence alone had immobilized the invading fleet, shattered their confidence, and forced the galaxy to acknowledge a truth long ignored. Humanity was not weak. Yet even in restraint, the Guardian's power radiated through space, bending stars, twisting reality, and sending ripples of fear and awe across thousands of worlds. The empire that had dared to attack had been shown the limits of arrogance, and their pride, once absolute, crumbled into despair. Commanders could no longer issue orders with certainty. Pilots could no longer chart a straight course. Soldiers felt the weight of every misjudged assumption, every act of hubris, every dismissal of the human race. And somewhere deep in their minds, they sensed that the Guardian could have destroyed them in an instant, yet chose not to. That choice, that patience, was far more terrifying than annihilation. On Earth, the people bore the full emotional weight of the moment. They did not rejoice. Their relief was tempered with grief. Families lit candles for those lost in the destroyed colony, tears running freely for lives that would never return. Scientists watched trembling instruments as space itself shifted, measuring phenomena that defied comprehension. Leaders felt the burden of responsibility settle heavier on their shoulders than ever before. Humanity had survived, yes, but at a cost. The Guardian had awakened not to glorify them, but to protect them, and its presence reminded every human that survival required sacrifice, endurance, and restraint. Pride was secondary. Gratitude, reflection, and solemnity defined this moment. They had been saved, yet the saving was not free. It demanded understanding, reverence, and a willingness to honor the lives lost. Deep beneath the planet's surface, the Guardian extended its awareness beyond the immediate threat. It sensed the intentions of the Empire, the reactions of the Galactic Council, and the nervous calculations of younger species across the stars. Every thought, every fear, every misstep was observed, measured, and accounted for. The Guardian did not feel malice toward those who had threatened humanity. It understood necessity, probability, and consequence. Its actions were deliberate, its restraint intentional. It allowed the fleet to survive, allowed minds to perceive their own folly, allowed the galaxy to witness the cost of underestimating the quiet planet that had long been overlooked. For the Empire, the experience was nothing short of a reckoning. Officers whispered apologies in empty corridors. Soldiers knelt in silence, praying to powers they had never believed in, terrified by visions that had not been theirs to see. Dreams invaded the minds of the fleet. Visions of humans surviving impossible odds, memories of past colonies lost to their own hands, possibilities of destruction that had never been intended but could now be avoided. Pride had shattered. Certainty had evaporated. Every tactic they had relied upon for centuries was useless, irrelevant, powerless against a force they could neither see fully nor fight conventionally. They had confronted humans as a species they thought fragile, only to realize too late that humanity had always been prepared for the moment when patience met inevitability. In the councils of the galaxy, debate turned to fear. Elders admitted mistakes long hidden. Young species whispered in terror and respect. Humans were no longer underestimated, no longer dismissed, no longer irrelevant. Across systems, ancient histories were revisited, forgotten warnings acknowledged, and old myths recognized as truth. The Guardian had revealed not only its own existence but humanity's hidden strength, and the lessons were clear. Weakness could be an illusion, restraint a weapon, and survival a force stronger than fleets or empires. The Guardian's power radiated with precision, enforcing boundaries without causing unnecessary destruction. It disrupted navigation, scrambled communication, and bent space around the fleet, yet it left life intact. The message was undeniable. Humanity would endure, and the galaxy would learn that any threat to them would come at consequences no mind, no fleet, no empire could escape. Those who had once sought to destroy Earth now faced not annihilation, but an unyielding force of quiet, patient certainty that made fear inevitable. The Guardian did not rejoice in terror. It did not delight in their realization. It simply acted with purpose, as it had been designed to do for millennia, preserving life while teaching respect in the same breath. Humans, watching from their cities and hidden observation facilities, absorbed the lesson with deep emotion. Relief mingled with grief, pride with humility, awe with sorrow. They understood fully that the Guardian's restraint was not weakness, but wisdom. They had survived because they had endured, because they had prepared, and because their protector had awakened at the precise moment it was needed most. For the first time in countless millennia, the galaxy saw humanity as it truly was, resilient, patient, and not to be underestimated. And for every human, that revelation carried a weight heavier than celebration, heavier than triumph, heavier even than fear. It was the weight of survival, the solemn recognition that their species had earned its place in the universe not through destruction, but through endurance, foresight, and the quiet power of patience embodied in the Guardian who had finally awakened. The Empire, the councils, and the countless observers of the galaxy had no choice but to acknowledge it. Humanity was no longer a minor player, no longer a quiet species, no longer someone to test. The Guardian had proven that the quietest voice, the most restrained presence, the oldest promise could reshape reality itself. Every star, every fleet, every council chamber carried the knowledge now. Underestimate humans at your own peril. And deep within Earth, the Guardian pulsed with calm certainty, its watchful gaze steady, its power absolute, its purpose clear, and its patience unbroken. Humanity had survived. Humanity would endure. and the galaxy would never forget the lesson carved into the stars that day. The galaxy had shifted in ways no historian, philosopher, or general could have predicted. The once mighty empire that had dared to attack Earth now drifted helplessly, immobilized by the Guardians' silent authority. Ships hung in orbit like statues, crews frozen in awe and terror, their systems warped by forces beyond comprehension. No weapon fired, no battle was fought, yet the lesson had been delivered with unshakable clarity. Across countless star systems, species that had long ignored humanity now whispered, debated, and recorded the events as history. Fear and respect had replaced indifference. Pride had been humbled, arrogance subdued. The Guardian had risen not for war, but for preservation, and in doing so, it had forever altered the balance of power in the galaxy. On Earth, humans felt a weight unlike anything before. Relief mingled with sorrow, pride with grief, awe with humility. Families remembered the lives lost in the colony, and every tear shed honored not only the dead but the resilience of the living. Citizens and leaders alike understood that survival was no longer a quiet hope, but a responsibility shared with a protector older than memory, wiser than fear, and patient beyond reckoning. Every action, every choice, every sacrifice of their ancestors had contributed to this moment. Humanity had endured, not through overwhelming force, not through fleets or weapons, but through foresight, endurance, and restraint. And now, the Guardian had awakened to safeguard the culmination of that long, unbroken chain of survival. The Guardian's awareness stretched across space, enveloping the immobilized fleet, the observing worlds, and the galaxy itself. It saw fear, arrogance, hope, and sorrow in equal measure, and it weighed each carefully. Its actions were deliberate, precise, and restrained, demonstrating the difference between power and authority. It did not seek vengeance. It did not delight in terror. It existed to preserve humanity, to enforce boundaries without cruelty, and to remind the galaxy that the quietest, most patient forces could be more formidable than the loudest wars. The Guardian's presence communicated a truth impossible to ignore. Underestimate humans no longer, for their strength was measured not in fleets but in resilience, foresight, and the living will of a protector awakened at the exact moment it was needed. The empire that had attacked could do nothing but stare at their helpless ships. Officers fell to their knees in shame, crews wept quietly, and the memories of all their victories seemed meaningless in the face of a force they could not touch, could not anticipate, and could not overcome. The arrogance of centuries had been dismantled, not by weapons, but by patience, precision, and unyielding resolve. Dreams haunted the fleet, visions of past destruction, future possibilities, and the indomitable survival of humanity pressed into their minds like waves, reminding them of a truth they had never been prepared to face. Pride had been replaced with humility, arrogance with understanding, and fear with deep, unshakable awe. In the councils of the galaxy, elders spoke openly of mistakes long ignored. Young species whispered in terror and respect. Humans were no longer considered weak, insignificant, or irrelevant. Ancient warnings once dismissed as myths were finally recognized as truths, and the implications rippled across every system. The Guardian had shown the universe that the greatest power did not lie in fleets or technology, but in restraint, foresight, patience, and the enduring will to survive. It had acted with care, preserving life while enforcing lessons no army could ignore. Humanity's existence had become a living testament to these principles, and every observer, every strategist, every scholar knew that the balance of power had shifted forever. Back on Earth, people absorbed the enormity of the moment. Relief did not lead to celebration, awe did not lead to arrogance, and grief did not fade. Instead, every human understood the gravity of their survival. The Guardian's awakening had saved them, but it had also demanded recognition of the responsibility that came with being protected. Humanity had endured countless dangers, and now it had a force that ensured their survival, a living, conscious, precise protector who could bend reality itself to safeguard them. The weight of that knowledge settled over the planet like a quiet dawn, heavy, undeniable, and eternal. The immobilized fleet, the observing worlds, and the councils of the galaxy all understood the final truth. Humanity had survived not by might alone, not by conquest, not by fleets or weapons, but by patience, endurance, and foresight. The Guardian had awoken, and in doing so had rendered arrogance meaningless, reshaped strategies, and instilled a humility that could not be undone. Its restraint was a lesson more powerful than destruction. Its presence a warning more enduring than any war. Its awakening marked the beginning of a new era, one in which humanity would endure, unyielding and respected, safeguarded by a force older than memory, wiser than empires, and patient beyond reckoning. And so, Earth stood beneath the stars, quiet yet resolute, mourning its losses, honoring its dead, yet unbroken, as the Guardian pulsed beneath the surface. Across the galaxy, fear and awe spread in equal measure. Stories of humanity's hidden strength were whispered in every corner, and the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Humanity had survived, the Guardian had awakened, and the universe would never again underestimate the quiet, patient, indomitable force that lay beneath a blue and unassuming planet. The lesson was clear, eternal, and unyielding. Humans endure, the Guardian watches, and the galaxy must respect what it cannot control.